Okay. Getting there.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Today is Daf Tes in Maseches Tesi in Bometzia.
The old
The
bat.
old bat Tesi. So 2 lines from the bottom, we were discussing ways of acquiring or showing acquiring an animal, and could riding be a form, right? Does that constitute the one to make a kinyan? So we're going back and forth, and the Gemara continues 2 lines from the bottom, Ches and Beis, and away we go. So Tashma, come listen. So let's say you have 2 people. They were pulling a camel, or they were leading a donkey. 2 people leading a donkey. Oh, or one person was pulling, right? Was dragging it, and the other one was leading it. So through this method, one would acquire. They could acquire, the animal. No, only pulling applies by a camel, and leading by a donkey, but you cannot pull a donkey or lead a camel. So pulling is with more force, right? Right. That's correct. So nevertheless it says, right? Nevertheless it says that one of them was Moshe, one of them was pulling it, the other one was leading it. So it doesn't mention anywhere in Rachav riding it. So obviously riding is not a method. One jumps on an animal, it's not a method to acquire the animal. Our answer is look.
What's the difference between Moshe and Mani?
So that's what he just asked. Yeah. That's what
one guy is behind.
Or, so it could be that, so we saw earlier, or right. So one is leading it, that it directs it where to go, and the other one is actually physically pulling it. So the Gemara says, "Look, who I did in there feel Rachel really means riding." The reason why I specifically want to use the word Moshe Chamanig is to basically to exclude the Rabbi Yehuda. Because he says there's only one way to do by a camel, right? In other words, you can't do leading by a gama. Please, thank you. You only do pulling, and you can't do pulling by a chamar, only leading. So Kamash Malan, according to the Tanakhama, we want to or the Rabbanan, we want to teach those two. Even the opposite would work. So opposite of Rabbi Yehuda. So Gemara says, okay, so say one statement. Listen, and you should stay like this. 2 people were either pulling or leading. So whether it's with a camel or whether it's a donkey, so Gemara answers, why don't you just say that? So Gemara says no. Because one of those ways don't work. So which way doesn't work? So you can some say Mashiach b'chamar, some say everyone agrees, even the Rabbanan agree. Tanakama that Mashiach does not work by a gamal. Some say Hanaga b'gamal, or leading a camel, that was one doesn't work. Therefore, it doesn't say either way. Be the ma'asim say, but some want to bring the kasha of harchava, right, of riding, not harchava, right, really right, as opposed to harkava, right, grafting, right. Anyway, so the issue of riding, from the seifa, he's the ma'asim of the seifa, midazu. So when it says b'mida zu kana, and this is the method to go ahead and acquire. So b'mida zu. So why does it say b'mida zu only this way? Sounds like it's to exclude something else. To exclude what? La mayute rachav is not to go ahead and exclude riding. That riding is not a way to go ahead and acquire the animal. So Gemara says lo. The mayute yivcha to exclude the opposite. So Gemara says if it's the opposite, hachi hain Rabbi Yehuda. That's Rabbi Yehuda. So Gemara says, it's the same thing. So some say no, tzad echad delaykana is. All right, some say no, that one of the ways doesn't work. According to, right, in other words, this way. In other words, they argue, even the Rabbanan don't say all 4 ways. In other words, either combination of dragging or leading, right, both by a camel or donkey. One of them doesn't work. And which one is that? Idami, some say Mashiach b'chamar, some say by dragging a donkey. Vizdami, some say Hanhaga b'gama. Others say leading when it comes to a camel. Fine. Tashba, third of the way down on Testament Aleph. So one person is riding a donkey, and there's another person walking in front, holding on to his masira, like the leash, the reins. Thank you. Zak kana chamar. Is that kind of masira? So they go ahead. I guess this animal is half great, right? They go on, and so one acquires the guy who's riding it acquires a donkey, and the guy who pulls the reins he acquires the masira, right? The what's it called? The English or the I guess the reins we'll call it. So Shmamina, what we learn from here, Rachel Kani. Obviously, Rachel was Kani because we said the guy was Rachel acquires the donkey. So Gemara says no, Hachanami ben Mani beraglav. No, it's not just he's sitting and riding it. Right, he's using his legs. Right, he's using the spurs in his feet and the legs, and that's the way he's manning. So Gemara says, "Ihachi nikni nami nami rakov b'masira." So he should also acquire. So if he's on it, then he's leading it. So he acquires the whole thing. If one acquires the whole thing, shouldn't he also acquire the reins and the bridle? What's it called? The bridle. Right, that's upon the head of the donkey. One should acquire that part, right? Just like two people pick up a talus together. So this guy, it's like he picked up half the bridle, so that should belong to him. Siachi nikni nami rachav b'masir rachav b'masiri, right? He should also acquire that. So the one says, you're right. Ema zek kana chamer v'chatz masira, the zek kana chatz masira, right? The one guy acquires the donkey and half of the bridle. The other one says also. Acquires just the half the bridle. They split that because one is holding it and the other one's holding the donkey or riding the donkey. So Gemara says no. So in the case of the person's riding it, so in order to acquire something that's picked up, so you need the item to be picked up. So it has to be picked up by someone with the intention to go ahead and acquire it. So in other words, the magbiya lei bendas, because the person is sitting on the donkey. And the other part, the bridle, is being lifted by somebody, i.e., the other person. So therefore, it has the potential to be acquired. But the person who only held on to the reins, my cunning, right? So what did he acquire the other part with, right? In other words, there's no bendas on the other end because the other person's riding the donkey. There's no bendas in here. Mm-hmm. So Gemara says, oh, fine. So ema zek kana chamor v'kulei b'masira. So let's say that this person, the person riding, acquires the donkey and the headpiece, right? The bridle, whatever it's called. And the other guy acquires just what is in his hand. So Gemara says, hi, I understand. I understand. So why should he be able to go ahead and acquire the other person?
Only
that which is in his hand. The part that's in his hand.
The rein.
Right. And not the entire contraption or half the contraption that's involved, because there is no bendas holding the other part of that. So therefore you should only really require, it's like you pick up something from the ground, but you don't pick it up from the ground, you just hold on to it. So by holding on to it, I didn't pick up the entire item. I only have a grip on part of it. So I only really acquire the power of my hands. I don't acquire the entire thing. Right.
That's when the Mishnah says after Mani with Mosira, or physically holding the animal's head.
Which in this case, or the right.
We always assume Mani and you pull the reins.
Right.
But now we're saying maybe that could be different because the reins might only be one of the reins, not the donkey itself or the animal itself. So when we say Mani just stop, I would
right.
that would be.
So it says here, let me just see the lesson of typeface. Let me just see if he because over here he uses. Right. Rashi specifically says the Eino Mani. So this is a scenario where he's not Mani specifically. I mean, Rashi points out that's why he uses the lashon of toyface, right? He's just
the idea of Mani was only given as a possibility when the animal was too big to come to the sheep.
Right.
The real thing is that you have to pick it up.
Right. Well, Hagbah. Right. Yeah. Hagbah is not with this. Right. With behemoth gods. Right.
So it's a leniency because it's
right. Because the normal way to acquire an item is through Hagbah, right? The number two is Mashicha. The other thing is, handing over.
If I would ask you if you have any more Mishnah or Echamani, I'm sure he said it, one is leading it, meaning one's pulling it.
Right. So over here, right, because that's what it's used of the toughest Masira, right? Toughest Masira. It doesn't say Mani Masira, it says toughest. So in other words, he didn't really, he basically just wanted the reins, to bring it to his horse or whatever, or donkey. So Gemara says,
just grabbing the.
So even in the case of one who finds a mitzvah for his friend, his friend acquires it. So when I'm picking it up, for him. So hi daita didek magbile ilu kani lachrin maknin. But in this case, I understand. So he doesn't acquire for himself, but he should be able to acquire it for somebody else. In other words, the only reason why we normally say that he can acquire for somebody else is because he's also acquiring for himself. Since he's acquiring for himself, so therefore there's a kinning going on. But if there's no kinning going on for himself, he's not being magbiyat for the other person. So Amar Ravashi zeh kana chamar ubeis pegia v'zeh kana mashitavas biyado. So that one says you're right. So therefore, this one acquires a donkey and also the base pegia, right? The entitled part, the part that's on his head. V'zeh kana mashitavas biyado v'ashar loy kani. And the rest of it is not acquired at all because there is no Ben Das who's able to sort of make this a pickup on behalf of the other. In other words, even the guy who's holding the reins, right? He's not making a kinyan for that person because we don't allow him to acquire anything. So therefore, his kinyan should help the person on the horse if it's not helping himself. And really, like it says, no, he really does acquire. I didn't, take the whole thing. Well, he has the ability to pull it. So since someone has the ability to, if you're holding something, you have a grasp on it. So you have the ability to lift up if you choose to do so. So therefore, it's like he picked it up. Or says, however, barusi, right? Some say this is a bedusa mistake. Why is that? If you don't say that, so talashim al gabi karka v'chatzi al gabi amud. So let's say you have a garment, right? That's on a post, above the ground. Let's say 2 feet. There's like a pile, whatever, one of those things sticking up from the ground, and part of it is on there, and part of it is on the ground. And one person pulls the part from the ground, and the other person takes it from the higher post. So hachinami the kamakani, right? Ubasa laikani, right? Only the first person should acquire it, right? Because he is right now, when he picks it up from the ground, the other part is already in the air because it's sitting on the post, right? And therefore he could it's like he already pulled it away. And the other person picks up off the ground, right? The person who takes off the top hasn't done anything because it's still on the ground. In this case, we're going to say only the first person acquired it off off the ground, but not the second person, right? So since he's able to go ahead and pull to himself, so rather, since we do not make a distinction when two people pick up a garment as to whether the garment is either higher up or off the ground, why? Because if the other end is already off the ground, it's like you pulled it off, but one end is still on the ground, it's like you didn't do anything. We never made that distinction. So it must be rather it must be that this Rabbi Abu was a mistake, and there is no chiluk between whether the heights, one is higher than the other. So touchback, listen, one is riding in the field, he's allowed to acquire something, umanig ba'ir, or leading right in the city. So kana, then he acquires it.
What kind of animal?
A regular, let's say a donkey. We've been discussing a donkey, right? So what do you see over here? That manig, this is the way to be kind of something. So manig. So once again, the word says no. But manig beragla. He was kicking it using the spurs, and therefore that was the way he was manig it. It wasn't just sitting on top. So the word says manig.
You mean while he's sitting?
Yeah, he's right, and therefore that's manig. He's like actively making a move as opposed to just sitting on top. And the animal's walking, I'm not causing it to move, right? But if I'm, kicking it, right? So that kicking it is an active role of leading it. And therefore it's like manig, it's like I'm leading it, I'm causing it to go down this road because I'm kicking it, and therefore that's a form of manig.
So really the kniya is not necessarily just by holding a rope.
Exactly, holding is nothing. You have to lead it, you have to cause it to move. Exactly.
So instead, vertical lift is
right, moving forward, exactly, because you can't, like as Mark pointed out, right? These animals are too big. It's not a small sheep where you can go ahead and pick it up, or a baby lamb, or whatever. The rest is ihaki haino manig. So what says trek gabi manig? There's two types of manig. So ihaki rachel beir. So I understand if a person's riding in a city, my time loikana. Why does that not acquire it? Right? Why is it rachel only besada, not in the field? Because it's not the way of the derech of the person to go ahead and ride in a city. It's too crowded to go ahead and ride in a city. People, can't pick up speed. It's too crowded. Certainly, Rav Ashi, Rav Kana, Elamiato, it'd be Arniki b'Shabbos. Person picks up a person Shabbos. Shein Dargon Shabbanei Adam lahag be Arniki b'Shabbos. It's not the normal way of a person to pick up a purse full of money on Shabbos. It's muksa. So achinami d'leikana, a person doesn't acquire it because it's not the normal derech. Ella, my David, Vikani. Rather, a person picks up a purse on Shabbos. He does acquire it. He happens to violate Shabbos, but he also acquired it. So achinami, in this case, my David, he should be acquire the animal. He should be running the city. Vikani. So Ella, rather we're talking about, let's say a person was making a business transaction, and he says, okay, here's the money, go ahead and acquire it. And he says, Dermalei, Kani kederch shebnei adam kain. Go ahead and acquire it the way people acquire it. And therefore, it's not the normal derech, even though it would work, but it's not the normal derech to go ahead and ride in a city. It's too crowded. So therefore, that wouldn't acquire the reichev. If he tells him to do that, he wouldn't acquire it in such a way because he told him to go ahead and acquire it like people acquire it in the city, and people don't ride animals in the city. However, there are a few exceptions to that rule. However, turn the page. Rish is a rabbin who Kani. However, if it was Rish is a rabbin, in other words, it's so crowded and people might get concerned that they're going to lose their donkey or their horse. They don't want to lose it. Therefore, Rachav does work on Rish is a rabbin. Adam Chashav, also Adam Chashav, who Kani, that person does stay on the animal, right? It's a form of Chashivas. Isha, also a woman. He Kanya. It is the nature of them to remain riding on the animals, even Be'ir, because they can't really control their animals. Or v'inish or v'inish zilahu, but if the person also is like a manovel, then also Kani is such a type of person does ride around the town, even though it's a shtickle obnoxious. So by Rabbi Elazar, 3 lines on the top on Testament Bays. By Rabbi Elazar, go ahead and acquire this animal in order to acquire the kalim that are on top of it. So mahu. So take this horse and the books that are on top. Mahu. So liknois, me Amar like Kani. He never told him to be Kani, so that shouldn't work. So Allah rather meant the Sheikh Behemazu, pull this animal, the Kani Kalim Shalal, and go and acquire the utensils that are upon it. Mahu. What is the Allah here? So me, Gar says, I understand. Me Mahanya Mashiach the Behema Lefnu Kalim Alo. Do we say that the kinyan on the animal, right? You're going to acquire the animal. So since you're going to acquire the animal, you also acquire, right, the things on top or not. Samarava, Yamar Le, Kani behave of Kani Kalim, me Kani Kalim. Who says the Kalim are acquired in such a way? Chatzir ma'alechasi. Now there are special halachas when it comes to a chatzir, right? A chatzir can be used as you can acquire things through your chatzir, right? But one of the attributes of a chatzir is it is stationary. Over here, you want to acquire like a chatzir, but it's a chatzir, it's a moving chatzir. So that doesn't necessarily have the attributes of a chatzir. The Gemara says this is chatzir malechas. See, the chatzir malechas like Kani, and a chatzir malechas does not acquire things like a regular chatzir does. A regular chatzir does. I want to give you a boss, so throw it in my yard. I throw it in your yard. It's okay. It's your ball now. Your chatzir made the kinyan for you. But that doesn't work when it comes to chatzir malechas. So the Gemara says, okay, maybe we're talking about a case where the animal, stopped and you acquired that. So same thing. Just because you potentially stop or for momentarily stop, it doesn't do anything. It's still considered to be mahaleches, right? The hilchasa, so it must be talking about the kapaisa, right? When it was tied up, where physically is unable to. So then, in such a case, if it's unable to, and then you make a kinyan on the animal, then you can acquire the kalim. But if it's not tied and it has the ability to move, it's considered to be a chatzim malechas, and therefore we're acquire. So you and a ship, the kaptu dagim, right? Lucky fishermen got fish. They jump on board. Right? Then they fell into the ship. So too, you're saying the person does not acquire it, and therefore someone walks by and see fish in the boat, they go ahead and grab the boat because the boat is a moving ship, and therefore it's a chatzim malachas, and it shouldn't acquire anything. So no, svina minach naicha. No. A ship really doesn't move, right? The water happens to be moving, but it's not the ship. So therefore, the ship is not considered to be a chatzim alechas. It's considered to be stationary, and therefore, if the fish jump on board, then the fisherman acquires the fish, and it's just the water that's moving, and it's not the fish, right? The boat's doing nothing. It's just standing there. It's floating. That's floating.
We choose. We can create everything.
Flying fish we have here.
I know we're gonna have the cicadas soon. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm fine.
So Amalei Ravina Ravashi Elmiata. Another case. Haisa Malek Bishus Rabbim. V'zarek laget l'sei cheka. I said a woman's walking Bishus Rabbim, and you throw a get into her pouch. That's also right there, it's part of her property while she's walking. So Hachinami Dolomigarsha, she shouldn't be the Gureshes because it doesn't work. So Amalei also Minach anaika v'iyu da deka maskia metusa. So he says, no. The basket that she's with is doing nothing. It's just standing there. She happens to be walking, but the basket is just there. So therefore, it's not considered to be chatzim alechas. As opposed to the animal in itself is the moving thing, right? Over here, the basket doesn't move. She just happens to be holding the basket. Therefore, it's not considered to be chatzim alechas. Fine. Next Mishnah. Mishnah says, a person is going ahead and he's riding on top of behema. So I'm riding on an animal and I see a matzia on the ground. I see Avrami down there. So he says, Avrami, Taneli, go ahead and pick that up for me. All right, go ahead and acquire that for me. I need that. So Natla. So Avrami took it, Valmar, and he says, I see that baseball bat, and he is a chisiba, and I picked it, all right, and I did it for myself. Zachaba, Avrami gets to keep it. We'll soon see what his initial intentions were, but Avrami, go ahead. Just because I saw it first, and I told him, pick it up for me, it doesn't make it mine. Avrami picks it up for himself, he can go ahead and keep it. However, Avrami gives me the bat and he says, okay, you can see it now, but give it back to me. So but if Avrami said after he gave it to me, he said, by the way, when I picked it up, I wanted it for myself. He doesn't have the power once he gave me the baseball bat, right? Then he no longer has the power to say that I picked it up for myself. All right. So as long as he said it earlier, then it would be okay. So Zak the Gemara. So Tanan, Hasam, Mishalikas is a peya. So a person is picking up peya. Now peya is the corn of the fields left over for the poor, and is specifically for the poor, not for the rich, but any poor, right? So person sees peya, and he's a wealthy person. He picks up, he says, oh, I know a pauper, this is for him, this is for Bob. This specific ani, Bob. Rabbi Yezer Zachalo, that someone else comes, tries to take it, another poor person comes, hey, give me that thing, I'm poor, sorry, pick it up, I already acquired it for Bob. No, you got to give it to the first ani who claims it. And so what's the machlokes? So there, so Amar Ula Rabbi Shimon Levi. So Amar Ula Amar Rabbi Shimon Levi. Machlokes mi ashir ani. There's only machlokes. We're talking about the first person to pick it up as an ashir, and he tries to go ahead and designate it for a specific ani. The Rabbi Yezer saver mi godi boy mafkir nifsei v'havi ani v'chazile hashta. So v'chazile stashanami chazile. Right? That since if I want, let's say I'm the wealthy person, if I want to go ahead and be mafkir all my nechasim,
Right.
I'm poor. So since I could technically be poor right now, everything I own is hefker. Therefore, since I can become poor, so therefore I can go ahead and acquire it. And a double one. And since I can go ahead and acquire it for myself, I can also go ahead and acquire it for Bob. So like a double step. Since I become poor, I can acquire it for myself, and since I can acquire it for myself, I can acquire it for Bob. However, abundant sabri, no, you only say one migo. You can't say two migos here. So therefore, we don't say, and therefore in this case, he cannot acquire it for Bob. It goes to the first ani. Avamayani liani, but if it was the ani liani, so let's say I was poor and I wanted to pick it up on behalf of Bob, everyone would agree, Divra Akol, Zachalo, I can go ahead and acquire it for Bob. Why? The migos zachinavshe zachinam, because since I can acquire it myself, I acquire it for Bob. So Amalei Rav Nachman Lula, why don't we say, even in the case of where I'm poor, and so is Bob. Even in that case, right? The Tanakama, Rabbi Eliezer would say, I can acquire it for Bob, and the Chaim would say, no, you can't acquire it for Bob. But another ani comes along, he can go ahead and take it. It's not his. Why? Let's say a case of a found item, right? Like our Mishnah, right? There's a found item in the ground with a bat, and I see it first, and I say, I probably pick it up for me.
Okay.
The case of the Mitzia, where everybody who can acquire peya? Only poor people. Who can acquire a Mitzia? Anybody. So basically, we're all anim in this case, right? We're all poor people that are zeichet to peya. So we're all people that could acquire this baseball bat. Everyone's like an ani compared to it. But Tanan in our Mishnah says, we go ahead, a person's riding, he sees a Mitzia, and he tells his friend, Taneli, give it to me. And the guy picks it up. The Amar, and he says, I acquired it for myself. Zakaba, he acquires it. Now, if you can say, even in the case of ani me'ani from one person, in other words, that even in the case of a poor person, you can't go ahead and acquire for somebody else. But that's the machlekes. So Masnisin money, who is the author of our Mishnah? That would be the Rabbanan. In other words, over here, we'll say like this. According to Rabbanan, even if Avrami, right, would say, right, that he went ahead and picked it up from you, right, in other words, that he acquired for somebody else, according to this, he can go ahead and keep it, right? But if everyone says that the Divrei Kol, he is Zeicha, so low, so how many low Rabbanan lo Rabbi Yezer? Now it was like this: if Avrami picked it up for me, and then the Mitzvah, right? So, and then he decided to go ahead and keep it, right? So, according to, if he picked it up for me, right, initially, so, and everyone agrees that Ani La'ani works, then he can no longer go back and say, you know what, I'm going to keep the bat, y'all. Sorry, right? He can't do that because he already picked it up for me. He was Zachet for me. And everybody agrees that once I pick it up, in the case of the payah, once I pick up the payah for Bob, it belongs to Bob. I can't go ahead and keep it anymore. So too in this case, Avrami picked it up for me, then he says, you know what, yo, I'm going to keep it. Can't do that. So that, but our Mishnah says he could keep it, right? So rather, it must be. So the Mishnah doesn't say who he picked it up for yet. We just know he's Zeichet, so that's going to be the distinction, right? So now we're going to decide to say, hey, there's no one who says it must be the Rabbanan who says he doesn't acquire it. Otherwise, it belongs to Yoel, who was on the donkey, right? So so he says, Lo Rabbanan v'lo Rabbi Yezer. So Amalei Masnisin Amar Tchila. So this is now our Mishnah says where he says, I acquired it for myself first. In other words, if he said for himself first, it's not Avrami picked it up for me and then he decided to keep it. Avrami picked it up for me, and that's why in the case, right? Right. In other words, he never went to do it. In other words, he picked it for himself, and that's why he's able to go ahead and keep it. Right.
But the answer did mine.
Right, and that's and therefore he was never zeichet for me, and therefore he's zeichet for himself, and that's the reason why he keeps it. So, and Hakinami Mistav is also a logical to say it. Why? The Tani Sefer, the Sefer says, Mishanas Nalo. Once Avrami gave it to me, the other guy gave it to Mishanas Nalo. Amar, and then he says, and he's a chisi b'tchila. Oh, I acquired it first. And Lo Amar Klum, he hasn't said everything. So tchila b'sefer lamali. Why does it say right that tchila in the sefer, right? And he's a chisi b'tchila. I acquired it for myself first, right? So shita. Afal gav if he doesn't say tchila, right? Tchila kamar. It's obvious that he has to say tchila. Elav must reisha de'amar tchila. Must be that in the reisha it's talking about a case where he says I acquired it for myself first, and only then, before he gives it to me, then he's believed. Otherwise, not. I the idach and I the other opinion. So Tana Seifa Leguli Reish. Yes, it says in the Seifa, right, that Mishnasna, only then did he say Tchila, but it really meant so Seifa, Damar Tchila, only Seifa, he says, I picked up for myself first. However, Reisha, but in the Reisha, Delor Mar Tchila, he doesn't say over there that he picked it up first for himself. In other words, he went to go only. In other words, originally in the Reisha, he acquired it for the other person, and then only now he wants to go ahead and take it for himself. And even in that case, he wasn't zeichet on behalf of the other person, according to this opinion. All right, we'll stop here. Everyone have a wonderful day, wonderful Shabbos, and we met Hashem 6:45 on Sunday. Oh, and change the clocks.
Jack.